Hi, my name is Phil Metzger, and in 1992 I moved to Moscow, Russia. From there I lived in the beautiful Central European country of Hungary, where my family and I spent the next 20 years living, learning, and sharing about Jesus. Different foods, culture, and language, but underneath it all, we discovered the most amazing people. We learned that to share the gospel effectively, we had to adjust. We had to cross cultures. Now we're back in the U.S., and we're discovering that this country is a melting pot of culture. This show is committed to helping Christians connect to those who think, believe, and live differently than them. This is Crossing Cultures. Okay, well, thanks for joining us for this episode of Crossing Cultures, where we are working towards helping Christians learn how to connect to people who think, live, and believe differently than we do. Nick, thanks for being on this one.
Hello, sir.
Dude.
Good to see you again.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So, because we're going to do 2 episodes on the same subject. Mm-hmm. And the subject is going to be history. We want to talk about history. And because we're both history, no, we have no history connections.
Yeah, definitely not a history buff.
I was trying to think of something funny to say. But yet both of us have, as we've been talking about this and within this context of like race, there's a lot of conversation happening around the subject of history.
Yeah, it's important.
It is important, right? So because it's a kind of a big topic, and we're not going to just be stuck on facts and figures, but we want to talk about why it matters in this first episode, and then kind of give some examples of what that looks like moving on. So I want to start by sharing a couple of my own experiences, and I wrote some of these down living overseas. My kids went to school in the country we lived in. We lived in Hungary. They went to Hungarian school. They learned in a different language. From a very early age, they learned, they spoke Hungarian. They went to school learning Hungarian. They learned not only just a different language, but like they learned math in Hungarian, which I know it sounds like, it's like even a different way of learning like math, a different way of learning science. They learned history from a completely different perspective.
Not
than
U.S.
I
history. They didn't learn U.S. history. I take it.
Well, here's the irony. They actually do learn U.S. history, but not the way they learn more, I think. We kind of joked about it.
They learn the true side, probably.
Yeah, and they there's kids that were 9th or 10th grade. I remember talking with kids, Hungarian kids, and they're like, "Oh, the capital of South Dakota is," and, dude, I have no idea what the capital is. What is the capital? Whatever. That just proves the point. They had such a deep, rich understanding of history from a totally different perspective, not an American perspective. And I'm not mentioning this as either good or bad. It's just what it was, right? And so my daughter would come home from school, and she'd be like, I'd say, what did you learn today? Oh, we learned about the Battle of Mohacs. Like as if I would know what she's talking about. I'm like, oh, really? No idea.
So what's that?
So what is a Mohacs? What do you mean? It's a city, and I guess the point that I'm wanting to make at the very beginning of this episode is simply this: we shouldn't be shocked by this or surprised by this. There's a lot of history none of us know. There's a lot of. We were just talking about before we started recording. We were talking here in this room about events that have happened 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, right.
Current events. That some of you guys hadn't heard about.
Significant events.
Significant. Millions of people's lives have been affected in Eastern Europe, and nobody here really knows about that. And that's not a bad thing.
Right.
How can anyone know all of it? And I guess I'm wanting to say that because the world is a big place, and a lot is happening and has happened. And I think that we get very sensitive because I think this topic of history, especially because obviously in a race context, we're wanting to talk about how that there's history that's happened in America that none of us have been really aware of or we've brushed over. And by re-examining that, it gives us a chance to say, if we really want to do better, we should learn from our past.
Yeah, I think that's good that you bring this up because something we've talked about before where there can be this sense, at least this tone that you hear when people are talking, where they're kind of like courting the past, really longing to be back the way things were, or if we just didn't have to do this nowadays, or things weren't like this nowadays, if we could get back to whatever the idea of it was, then things would be better. But I think that this episode or these 2 episodes really are just about looking at history in a way as not to learn every single date and fact, but just to look at it with a real sense of sobriety and
Yes.
not everything in anyone's past was a good thing. Not everyone in anyone's history was something you'd want to repeat or have to continue. And so I think just being honest about what has happened in this country as it relates to race and spirituality, and just what things we don't want to keep doing.
Yeah, because the goal, again, like I think some people want to bring it up just to rub it in the faces of others, which is going to do no good.
Right.
It's not going to build, because our goal is about building relationships.
Exactly.
We want to connect to people. And by doing that, it's like I'm acknowledging, like I can mourn with those who mourn. Like if somebody's hurting and they feel it has to do with a broken history or a broken situation, it's okay for me. Again, and I've mentioned this before, but I lose nothing to honor people.
Yeah, that's good.
And and I think looking at our history with a sober context, I can do that, and it doesn't hurt me. It doesn't take away from what I believe God's doing in my life for me to honor somebody else by saying, "Man, that does stink." I never knew that. None of us, and I'll give one more example of this, and we can get deeper into this. But I was in St. Petersburg, Russia. And I was speaking at a conference, and I was with a couple, well, maybe just one other American dude, and I had lived in Russia before, but never been to St. Petersburg. It's a beautiful city. It's incredible, and it's really well known for its siege during World War II. I guess it was like a massive siege, and so we thought, let's do a tour. Let's do a World War II tour of St. Petersburg and just like learn. So we're doing this tour. Okay, I'm completely blown away by I love learning. I love studying and reading biographies and history books.
Okay.
Love it. Love war books. It sounds ridiculous, but Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War I. I love these. Korean War. I love to learn about how because even from, let me tie this into even my own passion for cross-culturalism, is that we know it's a phenomena that after wars have happened, has been some of the greatest missionary movements. So the biggest movement into Korea occurred after the Korean War.
Oh, wow.
Some of the biggest opportunities we've had in Afghanistan have happened after and even during our war with Afghanistan.
Yeah, right.
It's a kind of a phenomena of and you know who were the biggest group of missionaries were back to Japan? It was former POWs.
Wow.
They had been imprisoned in that country.
No way.
And then God saved them, and they got a heart to reach people back there. It's an interesting, unique, beautiful thing. So I'm in St. Petersburg, and I'm learning about a history that I thought I knew. I know World War II. Okay, Europe was getting their butts kicked, and then America came in, and we exactly, and we fought, and it's the greatest generation, and all these things. And I'm kind of saying it like none of it's true. I think it's all true, but. It's not a one or the other, it's an and. I'm in Russia, and I'm hearing it from their perspective. So at the very end of the tour, the guy says, and this is how we won World War II. I'm like, dude, what are you talking? Me and the other guy look at each other like, did he just say that? Like you did. But at the end of it, we both had to acknowledge they kind of did too. It's not an or.
Who was this we? Yeah.
Yeah, who's the we? They attacked Germany from the Eastern Front. We came in on the Western Front. And of course, Canada and England and so on. But it was this joint thing happening where we were squeezing Germany. And yet, my history lesson is about Eisenhower and Patton and the great American heroes, and they were, but Russia has a whole nother set of them. Yeah. And I guess it just opened my eyes. Here I am. It was 15 years into the mission field, living among people that were from a different culture than my own, and yet once again I had to stop and go, oh my gosh, I've never thought of that. And war and our past wars have genuinely shaped the way we see our world.
Yes.
We as Americans, we win. We win. We go somewhere and we win. We won to get this country and we win wherever we go. Most countries, that's not their story. Most countries, that's not their story. But it was in Russia, and it just kind of blew me away. And so I just thought, if we're going to talk about history and we want to talk about American history, I have a perspective. But the question is, can I give up my perspective and learn facts that contradict my perspective and do it so that I could become a better person.
Make some space, yeah. Making space in our viewpoint. That's good.
And so, right, I'm a white guy. In case you didn't know.
I've noticed.
You figured that out. And you're black.
Just the last episode I noticed.
Just today. In case you didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you're black. You should know everything about black history, right?
I mean, Anna Marie knows I know everything about everything. So
you know everything about everything. I mean, isn't that like part of
right.
the misnomer of like the myth that like I don't know all of our history.
Right.
I don't know half of our history. I don't know most of our present, let alone the history. And now into that, we're learning a lot of stuff right now. I guess the reason I'm saying it even kind of in a joking way is to say like, and I think we've made the point before, is that neither one of us gets to represent an entire cultural group.
Mm-hmm. Nor do we need to.
Nor do we need to.
Yeah.
And you've been on a journey, like since everything's been happening, we've been talking a lot about this. Like I remember sitting at your house and being like, dude, I never knew these things. And then you're saying,
Me either. Yeah.
and it kind of made me feel better to know like we're kind of on this discovery.
Exactly, yeah.
And I mean together, not just you and me, but together as a country.
Right.
We're discovering things that we
Exactly. And I think it's important because, things are getting, I guess there's so much tension around, not just understanding what's happened, but the way to correct it is by, tearing out, people talking about tearing out statues and, to try to correct things, which, again, not getting into the depth of those arguments, but just there are significant things that have taken place in the past that are affecting what's going on today. Right. And so we just need to at least be able to, like you said, expand our viewpoint to see, the things that are happening today and that we're experiencing are have been bubbling up from something, and it's like I'm helped so much because I'm unlike you. I'm not really, and historically I have not been a history guy, because I just remember being in school and I was just always so confused by the dates, and I was like, I was a kid, like I couldn't tell 100 years from 1,000 years. I'm like, I don't know, it's a long time ago.
Moses and Abraham Lincoln.
It seems like it's the same thing. So it never grabbed me, history, until actually I became a believer and I realized, the Bible is a history book.
Yeah.
It's this collection of texts that are telling us, why we have what we have today, why we can experience what we can experience because these things have happened, But then even deeper, like I've said, it's like this studying Spanish has given me so much more than being able to say Spanish stuff.
And for everybody listening or watching, this guy like starts learning Spanish and he's blown my mind at how much you've learned. You've done amazing.
I've talked to a lot of people.
You do, but you're doing a great job.
No, it's good. It's awesome because like for example, in this discussion, there was at some point I was trying to figure out how to say the word history.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, the word is historia.
Okay.
But then I wanted to make a distinction between history and like just a story, like when you tell a story. And look up the translation, ask a couple people, and it's the same word, historia. And so
you're thinking it's got to be wrong,
yeah,
right?
It blew my mind though, because I was like, wait a minute. In that language, when they're not to say that you can't contextually differentiate,
right.
But just the fact that the same word is used for what's going on right now, a current story, like current events, and what has happened already, there's no delineation. I think as an English speaker, in my mind at least, I see history, like stuff in the past, with like on the other side of the wall.
Right.
The stuff that's happening around us today is like
past,
right now,
and
this
it's the now.
But the goal of
air conditioning.
Sure. The goal of what we're trying to do here is just see that, we are connected and continuous and constantly forming the experience of our life here.
Yes.
So there is not a really strong detachment from the things that have happened.
So our past shapes our present, shapes our future.
Even more than I could, just having that word, like literally having be no difference in the translation in Spanish, helped me to bridge it in my mind, like give me a new picture for, wait, history it has happened, but it's still ongoing.
Right.
So to participate in it it just serves us to know what has happened.
Exactly. And I love that you're connecting that to your, you get saved, and then the Bible is a history book. And it's like, it's the story of God's redemptive love from eternity past all the way through to eternity future. And yet, like, understanding that and knowing that and seeing how God works in people's lives helps me understand how he's working in my life. And so then learning about history, you know, I think it was, I think George Santayana, who was a kind of a philosopher, who had said, you know, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. He's the guy that kind of coined that phrase.
Yeah, right.
And yet, but there's another way of kind of looking at that. It's like, as I learn from the history, like, of God's redemptive love in the Bible, I'm gaining all of their wealth into my life today.
That's good, yeah.
And that's connecting to this idea of historia in Spanish, of like, it's my past and it's my present. It's God's story. Right. It's the story.
The story.
Today, then, now, forever. I love that. That's good. Okay, where are we? So, okay, there was a, and we're going to talk about it more in the next episode.
Yeah.
We want to actually dig into kind of specific examples and not do that in this first one, but just kind of lay the groundwork. But there's a great book that both of us were really influenced by.
Yeah, it hurt me, honestly.
Broken by.
It hurt, yeah.
Really hurt. And it's called The Color of Compromise by Jamar Tisby. And again, The Color of Compromise, Jamar Tisby. And you can watch it on Amazon. You can buy the book, you know, all that stuff. It was hard.
Yeah, it was hard.
It was really hard. Yeah.
We'll talk about it more.
We're going to talk about it more the next time. Okay. The next episode. But it helped us to shape a lot of why we felt this was necessary. So I want to expand on that then, and then the next episode we'll actually get into some actual things. People have, well, let me say it like this. I think as a human being, I have a short memory. In other words, like, you and I can have a relationship and like, I'm not going to remember in 20 years that you said one mean thing to me. I'm going to be like, dude, we're so far beyond that, or hopefully you would be the same way. But people groups have long memories. And I've watched this happen in the part of the world that I lived in for so long of
that's good, man.
That they, you know, both world wars were started because some people got killed. People. But those people got killed because people groups have long memories. We have we have a 500-year-old grudge. We have a 1,000-year-old grudge. And I've literally watched the creation of new countries in Eastern Europe because of 1,000-year-old grudges. And the reason I'm saying that is because I'm baffled being back in America now. And we're having a conversation where people are saying things like, well, slavery was 400 years ago. As if time has changed. Time changes that for people. You might not have, and I'm interjecting this, you could correct me, and I know you will, but you may not have seen yourself in connection to slavery personally. But as a people group, do you?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it actually makes me a connection for me. We've talked about this before when, like, you're counseling and you're aware of, like, all the conversations that are actually happening when you talk to one person.
Right.
And so, you know, maybe the conversation that I'm listening to as one-on-one is one thing. Right. But the cultural conversation, that's still the contextual conversation that hovers until that's dealt with, that just continues to hover.
It's always there.
It just keeps following the next generation until it's dealt with.
So how is this? Because, like, you know, I do hear people coming out. I hear, you know, there's black voices. It's not an issue. It's never been an issue. It's done. It's the past. We're not this way. And, you know, obviously, and I feel like there's a lot of people wanting to grab that and be like, see, here's a person who's not white who's saying the same things that I'm feeling. Yeah. And it feels to me, but I'd like to hear from you on this, there's a collective feeling that many people have regarding, you know, like, 400 years is not a long time as a people group. It's not a long time. As an individual person, maybe it is a long time. It's far removed from your life, but it's not as a culture. And so for me, and I mean, again, I'm not black. Is it hurtful when like someone will try to, like, speak for the entire cultural group?
I would say it doesn't seem hurtful to me, I guess. Okay. What it makes me think of, honestly, is, I guess, all of this time that we're in right now is almost like a security check when at the airport. You know, it's like every single person that's going to go get on the airplane, you have to get checked. You have to get screened
Yep.
to see if you have something that pertains to like the destination,
Right.
you know, that could hinder our travels.
Right.
And so it seems like to me as a country, we're all being asked to walk through this scanner of, are you carrying something
Wow. That's
that
cool.
is not going to help us get to the destination we all actually want?
Wow.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
So
do.
like some of these things that we're saying,
cool.
you know, white privilege, that, you know, these like really hot button terms, color blindness, and all these things that can really flare somebody up quickly. It's not about calling you this or singling people out,
Right.
or it's literally for no other reason than this, to say that, hey, we've arrived at a moment where we're trying to go somewhere
Exactly.
different. Are you the person that has something inside of you that's going to stop us from getting there?
That's right.
And so these messages won't
That's
apply to every person the same way.
Right.
You know, every person's life won't have to look, you know, a certain amount of degrees different based on what everybody's uniquely going to have to go through their own screening process
Right.
to make sure that whatever you're carrying into this next, you know, our nation's never going to be the same racially. And so we have an opportunity to now really check ourselves in loving community, hopefully, in loving community to just make this venture as fruitful and as enjoyable as possible going forward. So that's what I think of. You know, it's people that, you know, if you say stuff like, "Hey, you know, I'm not a part of this, or I'm just gonna figure about." Maybe it's true, but at least go through the screening process. Maybe you don't have anything,
Because we all are
but just
a part
go
of
through it so we
Just
can
go through it.
Yeah.
And be willing to let your because okay, so here's my tangent on this. There's been several moments in I'm thinking mainly of American history and not specific issue. Well, I guess specific issues where we've had great opportunities, and I'm thinking of Christians now, to go against the cultural perspective but stand on the right side of history. And quite often we have not. So we've sided with the cultural,
Yeah.
you know. So let me use an example. Like, you know, there was not that long ago when the cultural experience for somebody who was homosexual was everybody's against them. Everybody. The government, the laws, the church. And yet, as a Christian, this was an incredible opportunity to be counterculture by loving people. And loving someone, and this applies in every context. Loving people doesn't compromise my faith. It's not a compromise to love. Compromise is compromise, but love is love. I can love someone and respect them and let them know, hey, I'm sorry for what's happening. Oh, do you agree with my... No, I don't. But I'm going to love you. And you're not just a project for me. You're a human being. Like, this is not okay. Could you imagine how different the homosexual community would have seen the church had we gone counterculture to that? But what ended up happening is this. Decade after decade, the culture began to change and begin to realize, like, wait, maybe we're wrong. And the church didn't.
Last.
We were last. And kind of not, the reason I'm saying that, it's kind of a way off tangent to say this. I love what you just said there. What if this is our moment? It's partly why I think we wanted to do this. What if it's a moment for Christians to be like, I'm not going to just fall into the normal cultural patterns of just like, okay, you're attacking our history. How dare you? This is the greatest place in the world. Or you're attacking colorblindness, or you're attacking that I'm white privilege, or like, what if we were to just stop and have a posture of total humility that costs me nothing to do, because that's what the Bible tells me to have anyways.
Yeah, right.
For me to just have to stop and be like, I want to go through the screening. I want to go through the screening because there's a lot of arguments happening these days with people on these subjects, and one of them that came out recently was a lady. She says to me, you know, you're just saying these things so that you can feel exonerated by accusing everybody of this. So you're making statements against this, and then by doing that, it's making
Right.
And it's like, I don't want to be quick to be defensive, but I had to think about it. And it's like, no, I'm saying I'm a part of this. I'm not, like, just because you bring it up doesn't mean you've
Right. excusing
solved
yourself.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not recusing myself. I'm acknowledging, like, I want to go through the screening process myself. You know, and I think that's important, that we're not exonerating any of us in the learning process. And I'll finish with this thought, and then I want to hand it to you for some more. You know, the like, humility is going to be key right now.
Yeah,
It's going to be key for all cultural groups right now, because we are in a moment of what could be great change, and it could be great if we accept this. You know, the Bible talks about the New Testament. Jesus interacts with people all the time. He's constantly interacting with people. And I want to be like Jesus, right? That's like a Christian kind of a mantra, right? Let's be like Jesus. But the problem sometimes is that I insert myself into the role of being Jesus. So I watch Jesus heal a blind person. And then I watch Jesus talk to a woman, you know, at a well in Samaria. I watch Jesus raise the dead. I watch Jesus angry in the temple area or talking to a Pharisee. And I'm like learning, like, okay, this is what you say, and this is what you do, and this is how you are. But I have to stop, and this is an encouragement that I make to Christians all the time. I have to stop and remind myself, I'm not Jesus. I can learn from him, but I'm more like the other person.
That's good.
I'm more like the blind guy.
Yeah, that's super good.
I'm more like the Pharisee. If I want to take this to the extreme, I'm more like the dead guy than I am like the eternal living Son of God.
Yeah, absolutely.
And by doing that, I can do that in this. So when we talk about history and we talk about America, I'm not on the side of I'm the righteous. I'm on the side of, like, I'm broken like everyone else, but I'm also loved by God, and we want to have these conversations.
Yeah, no, it's good. And, you know, honestly, it's, again, with this idea of, like, we're all trying to get somewhere.
Yeah.
We're trying to have something that we're excited about. You know, like, one of the things we talk about in our house a lot with the kids is, like, we try to motivate them with the excitement of the possibilities rather than with the drawbacks of, you know, not doing something or, you know, this kind of just a more negative twist to it. And so, like, when I think of this opportunity, it's exciting to think about what society could be like if we absorb some of these things that just God wants us to, you know. And so it reminds me of a conversation I had with a buddy, and it's honestly linked to the first idea too about history being all one thing, is where, so he works specifically with organizations that are going through, like, transition, like successive transition, where the leadership is passing off to new leadership. And so he said one of the key points in the process, though, is they have to evaluate, like, extensively the strengths and weaknesses of the previous leadership, so that the new people coming in know, you know, okay, that this is what this president did super well. You know, this CEO had this talent set that served the goal of the company, you know, tremendously. But at the same time, he also, you know, either had some shortcomings here or never paid a lot of attention to this area. And these things, you know, obviously were not lending to the goal of the company. And so, you know, taking it over, that while these things need to still be up and running in some fashion, these are the things that if you can get these out of the way, or if you can build these things up, you'll be even closer to pursuing that end goal. I see it the same way, you know, as us, each next generation that lives in this country and in this world, we are being charged with, you know, carrying that torch for our time.
Yes.
And so if we, historically speaking, if we're not going to be willing to look back at the things that we're super thankful, you know, that our predecessors gave us, but also the things that we would actually be better if they do not continue to flow through to the next generation, if we don't look at them and grade them all equally, then what are we inevitably going to do? You know, we're just going to pass it straight on.
Nothing changes.
Nothing changes. And even example more that hits home for me. So my dad, I think I've told you, he's a therapist, and he works specifically with, like, childhood attachment, helping parents connect to their kids. And so he gave me this awesome book, which I'm sure many people have read that are listening, called The Whole Brain Child. And it's literally just, like, from a young age, how do you build emotional intelligence into children? And so this guy goes through, it's awesome. I mean, it's cool, super practical. There's, like, you know, examples throughout the whole thing. But at the end, in summary, he's like, everything said in this book is going to be helpful. But above everything else, the number one most helpful thing you can do as a parent, the best, he thinks he actually phrases it as the biggest gift you can give to your kids is to process the way that you were parented.
Wow.
As to say, no matter what tools you know, if you haven't looked at generationally what's been passed to you,
Wow.
you are going to inevitably continue to let it flow through to the next generation and so on and so forth.
So it's not a book about just learning how to.
It's not just the
It's
how-to.
about processing for your own.
But it's both.
Wow.
So once you,
it's good.
you know, you can learn the how-to, but if you haven't processed, they're gonna butt heads. They're gonna conflict. But once you've processed for yourself what you've been given as a parent, passing that down to your kids becomes, with that toolkit, so much more effective and so much more powerful for them, because you want them to be healthy and thriving, you know, emotionally.
Which means you have to be as well.
Which means you have to do the work to get yourself in that mode too. And so that's, again, like the reason why we're going here is just, we just need to find out the key elements of what's happened so we can get the usable stuff in and put it into the task that we have now.
And then we can
just make things how they should be.
Yeah.
Make things how they should be.
Oh, I really love that. Okay. So we'll stop then for now. And our takeaways are like, because I love that. And I think a lot of our takeaways are, we want to have a sober attitude towards our history, rather than this like, we're great, we're the best only. You know, I think this is a great, we love this country.
Absolutely.
We love this country. Is it okay to love a country and also reconsider elements of our history for the benefit of our future growth? I think the answer is yes.
Absolutely.
We think the answer is yes. And I love that. So thanks for being with us then today. And then look forward to the next episode where we do History Part 2. And we're going to look at some specific examples. And man, it's heartbreaking, but I feel like it's making me a better person in the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the goal. You know, humility, repentance, but also then like, okay, Lord, put these things into my life so that I could be better. So look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thanks for being with us on Crossing Cultures.